Hey everybody, it's David, Carolina Luther, and today we're going to be showing how I make a new bridge for an acoustic guitar. What we have here is a 1967 Gibson LG-0, nice little small body guitar. This is a lower end model for Gibson. They're not super valuable, but they're still nice, they're pretty good sounding guitars. But it has a problem that a lot of Gibsons from this era have, is that it was originally fitted with an adjustable bridge where the saddle could be adjusted. It would have had a large porcelain saddle, just like this one. This is one I took off of another guitar. Sitting atop two screws, which is the notch cut in the bridge for that whole apparatus to fit down into. Made it easy to adjust, easy to get it set up the way you like. The problem is that setup does not transfer sound into the top as efficiently. It's not directly contacting the bridge or the top for that matter. It's all sound has to go through those two little screws. You have all the weight of those screws and the brass inserts that they're screwed into, impeding the vibration of the top. Some of them sound great. I've played some adjustable bridge Gibsons that sound great, but most of them don't sound all that good. So a lot of times people will replace these with fixed bridges. That's the best way to do it, is to replace the bridge. What happened on this guitar and I've seen on others is instead of replacing the bridge, you simply plug the slot for this massive saddle to sit down into, and then mill the slot for a new, more conventionally sized saddle to fit down into. Works good for a while, but it usually doesn't last. The problem with that is these adjustable bridges were very thin and generally not grooved very well, so they almost always will crack after a while once it plugs in like this. And that's what's happened here. There's a crack running on the treble side and all the way through from where the old saddle was, and that could be glued, but really when one's broken through like this, it's best to go and replace it. And really it should have been replaced to start with rather than plugged like this. That's what we're going to do. We're going to remove this bridge. We're going to remove what's left of that adjustment apparatus. There's two brass inserts underneath this bridge. We're going to craft a new bridge, fixed bridge, replace it, and this guitar should sound a whole lot better, probably the best it's ever sounded, and get it back playing. So first thing we got to do is we got to get this old bridge off. So we're going to go and show you how to do that. Okay, now you can see this bridge a little bit closer. You can see what I'm talking about. This is a very large slot that's been plugged with a piece of rosewood and then a narrow slot cut into it. And we have a crack right here. It's broke all the way through. So we're going to replace this bridge, that's why. And a couple things that are different about this guitar. I've done a video on removing and re-gluing a bridge, so we're not going to get into a lot of detail on that part. If you want to see that, I have a video just on that process. But I said we're going to focus more on making the bridge, but there's a couple things that are different about this guitar versus the one in my previous video. The previous video was a Martin. This is a Gibson, and Gibsons of this era, a lot of older Gibsons, will oftentimes have screws in the bridge as well as glue. That is the purpose of these two pearl dots right here, is these are actually to hide screws which will go through the top. There's actually a nut on the end of each screw. They're machine screws, not wood screws. There's a nut on the end of each one, so we're going to have to pop these pearl dots out and unscrew these two screws before we can take this bridge off. And once I remove the bridge, you'll also see that there are two brass inserts that the original adjustment screws would have threaded into. We're going to remove those as well because those do impede the sound. This adds a lot of weight to the top, slows the vibration down. Which is another reason why I think it's better to go and replace the bridge rather than to plug it like this. Not only do they have a tendency to crack like this, you're not really getting the full benefit of going to a fixed bridge if you leave that in there, if you just plug this. Perfect. Sometimes it will. Yeah, there it goes. Sometimes you got to get a wrench in there to hold the nut on the inside, but sometimes if you just it's glued enough that it should just spread right out. Alright, ready to start popping this bridge loose. Like I said, I've done a video on bridge rig loose. We're not going to go into a lot of detail about this. If you want more detail about removing a bridge and re-gluing it, I got a video just on that. Basically, I've got these two blocks of steel that I've heated to around 250 degrees on a hot plate. That heat will radiate through the bridge, soften the glue enough that we can pop it loose. It may take a couple heatings. We'll start on one side, come toward the middle, then start on the other side, come towards the middle, and the bridge should pop off. Now, it was starting to come off anyways, and these were never glued that well to start with, so it shouldn't be too hard, but I don't know what glue was used to glue this plug, so that may be our issue. That may give us some trouble. Yeah, you see, it's about, oh yeah, this is coming off easy. Like I said, these weren't glued very well to start with, that's why I'm not a big believer in just plugging these adjustable bridges. Shouldn't take long. There it is. Yep. That'll do it. Now we got this bridge off. You can see here these two brass inserts, and then there would be two screws that would have threaded into these inserts that the old adjustable saddle would have sat on. And these are pretty big, and there's a big steel nut on the back side of these in a washer. There's a lot of weight impeding the vibration at the top. So since we're going to put a fixed bridge on this, we're going to remove these and plug these holes. So we have a 1/2-inch wrench here, break them free. We thread the screw in there. There's something to grab on to. Let's see if we can pull these out. And they're in there pretty good. It's starting to move. It's starting to come out. Go. There's one. Trying to go very carefully so as not to pull out a chip of wood as I break this loose. There it is. There we go. Now we've got two holes, and we'll have to make us a couple of mahogany plugs to plug these holes. Okay, now I've got all that adjustment crap out of there. We left some pretty big holes right here. I could just glue the bridge back down. It would hide these holes, but I'm just gonna have these holes filled with glue. I think it's better tone-wise and also for the structural integrity of the top if we actually plug these holes. So what I've done is I've cut a couple little round pieces of mahogany, because this is a mahogany top. With spruce, I would use some spruce soundboard stock, but I've just cut a couple pieces that fit down in there nice and tight, and I'm just going to glue them in there. We'll put some masking tape on the underside so that the glue does not drip down through these big holes. Put just a dab of tight bond on each of these. Just kind of smear it around the edge of this. Side of it, just enough. Now try to line up the grain. It really doesn't matter. Nobody's going to see this. Just for a second, my own OCD. This is tight enough. I think I'm just going to tap it in with a hammer. trying to clamp it very lightly because there's nothing to support the top right here. And we will scrape these flush once we once the glue dries. This sit for a few hours. I think it's better for sound traveling through it if it's solid. It may not really matter all that much, but also for this structural integrity of the top is the main reason we're doing this, because you don't want these two big holes right here with a lot of tension. You're asking for it to break and crack. It's part of the reason why these are not that sturdy. So we're just going to make this solid again. Okay, now we've got the bridge pulled off. It's time to get started making our new bridge. So what I've done here is I found a nice piece of Madagascar rosewood that matches the color of the original bridge and the fretboard, because this thing will be this real important match color of the fretboard fairly well. Now, as far as what this was originally done with, Gibson officially quit using Brazilian rosewood in the mid 60s, like 64, 65, something like that. They had some left over in like 66. But this guitar is a 67, so most likely it was Indian rosewood. But it is a little bit lighter and more reddish color, more like you would see with Brazilian rosewood. So that's why I went with the Madagascar rosewood that kind of matches that. This is about as close as you can get to Brazilian rosewood today. There is some Brazilian rosewood floating around that was imported in the United States before the ban. And if this was like a pre-war Martin, or a pre-war Gibson for that matter, and the customer's willing to pay for it, I would invest in a bridge made out of Brazilian rosewood. You can find it. It's very expensive, but you can get it. But since this is not that valuable of a guitar, most likely this is probably Indian rosewood anyways. We'll go with the Madagascar rosewood bridge on this. As you can see, I've traced the outline of our old bridge on here. I'm just going to cut this out with a bandsaw, and then we'll go over to the belt sander over here to finish shaping this up. And we want it to match as closely as I can to the original bridge, maybe slightly oversized. Don't want it to be undersized because we don't want to leave any exposed wood that we can see. And then we'll deal with our top profile last. We don't want to cut this just yet because we're going to have to shape the bottom of this because this is not perfectly flat. And so once we get our top profile here cut, then we'll fit this to the top of the guitar, and then we'll shape the top of the bridge as well. And there we go. Now we'll go over and finish shaping this on the belt sander. go. We have a perfect fit. And we're going to go back upstairs and we'll start fitting this to the top of the guitar. Okay, so we have our new bridge, or our beginning of a new bridge, as well as our old bridge sitting here. And you can see I've also scraped all the old glue and bits of finish off of the top where the bridge is going to go. I didn't show that. It's on my video doing a bridge reglue. I'll put a link to that at the end of this. That's pretty self-explanatory anyways. But the next thing we're going to have to do is we have to fit this new bridge to the top. As you can see, our old bridge sits nice and flush. Our new bridge actually rocks a little bit. That's because this top is not completely flat, and that's normal to a certain extent. When flat top guitars really completely flat. Some are made to be flat, and they will develop a slight belly over time with string tension pulling everything up. That's what the markings are done. This being a Gibson, was actually made with a slight arch at the top, and that arch has become more pronounced over time. This because string tension pulls everything up. Now that can become so extreme that needs to be fixed. The bridge, the top just simply not holding the bridge because the belly is so extreme. With this one, it's not horrible. It's noticeable, but it's not horrible. And also, this is a 60s Gibson with a big, thick plywood bridge plate. It's also a ladder brace guitar. So this top doesn't have a lot of flex to it. It's not going to want to reshape at all. So we're just going to leave the top as it is and fit our bridge to that top. And we'll show you how we do that right now. Okay, so to fit this bridge to the top of this guitar, we'll be using our chisels, scraper, and where we need to take off the fit, we'll be using this stuff, which is called inletting die. This is stuff I learned about doing gunsmithing. I mentioned before I was gunsmithing, before I was leaving here, still doing some gunsmithing work. This is basically just marking chalk mixed with grease. And what this does, we leave a stain where the wood touches this, a red stain, and we take off the stain. So what I've done is over here, I've actually put some masking tape on the footprint of the bridge there with no finish. And we'll brush this on, and we'll press the bridge onto the top and see where it's contacting. There's a stain, there's contacting it right there. We'll take it off until we have good contact all the way across. Put this to the top and glue that on the stain. Okay, as you can see here, we take this off. We have our inletting die brushed on there. I'm very careful not to get any inletting die anywhere there's bare wood, because it will stain it. There's some places where the finish is chipped off on this thing, so we got to be very careful about that. On the tape, we've painted it onto the tape, and anywhere it's finished, it should just wipe right off. And we will carefully put this where it needs to be. Kind of press it down on the top. Kind of maybe just a little bit. Yeah, and you can see red marks where it is contacting the top, and we'll just simply take off right there with the chisel. We'll keep doing that until we get the fit that we want. Just a little bit. Being a little more aggressive since I'm just starting. As we get closer, we'll take finer and finer cuts. Just removing anywhere that is stained red. And this will keep repeating this process until we have contact all the way across. You can see we're already getting better contact right there. As I believe I've mentioned many times in my videos, anytime you're working with chisels, they must be razor sharp. This rosewood is very hard to cut. You're not going to be able to cut cleanly, or you want to, unless your chisels are very sharp. And there we go. Got a pretty good fit. As you can see, that's not exactly straight. You can see some line underneath there. That matches the radius of the top perfectly. Now, before we can go shaping the rest of this bridge, we'll do one more thing. It's something I always do. I need to rough this up because we've cut this thing with scrapers and chisels, pressing this wood down smooth. Cutting very smooth. This is a surface like glass. This is very slick. Glue's not going to adhere to this. I don't know what kind of glue you use. You have to rough this up. And usually when you pull a bridge off, you'll see some markings with something like this will go on. Martin has this tool specifically for this. I like to use my tool scraper. And then just cut lines one way and the other way. Like I said, I've done this on my other video doing a bridge reglue. Go ahead and do it now before I shape the rest of it, because it's easier to hold the device with it this thick. Go. It's nice and rough. That should take glue nicely. Alright, so I've marked my holes using the old bridge as a guide, as a template, as you can see. And we're going to drill a hole just big enough to get my peg reamer in there. Because these are supposed to be tapered holes that fit the bridge pins. And I have a reamer to get these holes to the final size and proper taper. So we're just going to drill these out just big enough to get the reamer in there. And we'll do it while this is still nice and thick. So I have a nice flat surface to drill onto, because it's going to be slightly sloped once we get it done. It'll be easier to do this now. Now we can go back outside to the belt sander and we'll get this thing shaped up to its final dimensions. Okay, now that we got our bridge shaped, we got 2 more holes we need to drill. You can see there's 2 extra holes here, and those were where the bolts went through this bridge to help stick it to the top, and there were pearl dots hiding those screws from the top. We're not going to drill all the way through and put screws in this bridge, because those screws actually do hurt the sound of it a little bit, having those screws to the bridge, and they're not really necessary. And since we're not keeping this all original anyways, we're upgrading to a fixed bridge, it's better to just not fool with those screws. But we do need to replicate those dots for the sake of the cosmetics and making it match the original bridge. So we're just going to drill 2 shallow holes to inlay our pearl dots into it. If this was, say an LG-1 or 2 from the 40s, it was already a fixed bridge and a super valuable guitar, like a Banner model or something, and we're trying to keep everything absolutely original, I'd probably go ahead and put those screws back in it, even though probably sound better without it, just to keep it original. But with this guitar, we're already upgrading from this crappy adjustable bridge anyways. It's better just not, we'll just do away with those screws, because we're doing away with all the adjustment apparatus anyways. So we're just going to put a couple shallow holes here for our pearl dots to go into. Perfect. We'll just glue these in and we'll sand them flush. We'll get this sanded up. Alright, we've got our bridge ready to go. Sanded it flush. I can sand it up about 1500 grit. Got it nice and shiny and slick. And we're ready to glue this thing on. We'll cut our saddle slot after it's glued in. I'll show you why in a little bit. But getting ready to glue this down, we're going to be using hot hide glue, my favorite wood glue. For this particular job, Tight Bond does good as well. This is an older guitar. I like using hide glue. So I got everything taped up, prepped and ready to go. I always have to have everything where I need it when I get ready to glue, especially with hide glue, because you have very little working time with hide glue. So I'm not going to get into a lot of details on that. Like I said, I've done a video on just the bridge re-glue when I talked about that a little bit more. This thing's ready to go, so we're just going to heat this up a little bit with our heat gun. So we have a little bit more working time, because this stuff sets almost immediately, especially if everything's cold. You have to work very quickly. Very careful using a heat gun like this, you can really mess the finish up. If you're not used to using a heat gun, it's best to use a blow dry. But warming it up a little bit will give us a little bit more working time before this starts to gel. everything in place and finger tight before I come back and torque them down tighter. Once this stuff starts to set, you can't move it. I'm going to let this sit for 15 minutes and we'll peel this tape off, and the majority of our excess glue that oozed out should come off the tape. Then we can further clean this up with some hot water. Alright, 15 minutes later, this is starting to congeal a little bit. We very carefully pull this tape off. It should take most of our excess glue with it. Not all of it, but a chunk of it. Very careful when we come up and finish this. Yeah. Come back with some paint brushes and Q-tips and some hot water. So I have my glue pot cooking, just with hot water in it, no glue. Just to get rid of a bit of glue left behind. So, got this thing glued on here, everything cleaned up. This usually sets to sit overnight for a day or two for this to really fully cure. Once all the moisture is evaporated out of it, it's cooled down and it's hardened. And that's one of the things I love about high glue is it's good and bad that it hardens so quickly. It's hard, it sets very quick, but it gets fully cured and hard as it's going to be within a day or two. So we're going to take the clamps off tomorrow sometime, and then next day we'll cut our saddle slot and string this thing up. Okay, so we have our bridge glued in place. As you can see, we also have this jig set up on our guitar. This is my saddle slotting jig. And what this does is holds a router perfectly in line with the channel for the saddle, and also perfectly level with the top of the guitar because this bridge is not flat. And we'll use this to cut our saddle slot. We determine the location of our saddle based on the location of our original bridge, and also check with the scale length. The intonation of this is pretty good, so we will put it exactly where it was before. Sometimes we have to move these up and forward or backwards slightly from where the original was to get the intonation right. So we've got everything lined up and adjusted. Now all we got to do is just get our router in there and cut this slot. Okay, now we've got the jig off. You can see, I'll solve this there. Have a nice clean saddle slot, and our saddle fits in tightly, you can get it back out without having to pry on it. This is what we want. Now this saddle is sticking up a lot higher than it should be because this is the saddle that was in this bridge originally. And as you can see, this slot went all the way through. That's not the way it's supposed to be. So I'm not nearly that deep. So I'm going to take a good bit off of this saddle to get it to the height that I want. So what we've done is I measured where the string height would be just using a straight edge laid across here, which is not exact, no tension. And I'm going to have to bring that down about 4/64 of an inch, so about 2/32. And usually you have to take about double off of here to change the action at the middle of the neck, which is where I measure it. So we're going to take about 8/64, so 4/32. I usually measure bridge height at 64s off of this saddle, just as a starting point. The string teacher is going to bow this neck and we'll pull the top up a little bit, so actually going to take a little more off, just as a starting point. Before I even put strings on this, we're going to take about, like I said, about 8/64 of an inch off the bottom of this saddle to get it within a range, in the ballpark of where I want this to be. Okay, so we're going to take this down with the disc sander. A lot of people use different guides and stuff to kind of take this down to hold it true. I prefer to freehand it. It's just a skill that takes a lot of time to develop, and I feel it's important to practice that, being able to hold something steady and get a perfectly true surface without any sort of guide. So I always do it this way. See? Perfectly straight, no light underneath. Okay, so next thing we gotta do is we gotta remount these bridge pin holes. As you saw earlier, I left these kind of small, just big enough to get my reamer into, the way I can hand fit these. And if you look at the old pins, that's about how far they go in. So I'm gonna ream these out by hand, and I'm looking for is I like to get them to come all the way down but not fall out when they're all the way down. And they don't need to be chamfered or anything like you see on a Martin. You can see it's perfectly flat on the original bridge, and we're going to replicate that with this. We also don't need to notch these because these are slotted bridge pins as well. Almost there. And that's perfect. We'll just do each pin the same way. Perfect. Okay, we got strings on it. Everything looks good, seems to be holding up. Action is a little bit too high, as I expected it would be, so we're going to take this strings back off, take the saddle back out, and go back over to the disc sander to finish taking this down to our final height. Alright, got our saddle trimmed down where we needed. Our setup exactly as it was with the old bridge, what the customer wanted. He was happy with this setup before it broke. And this guitar's ready to go. And got a nice, solid, fixed bridge. Looks good, like it's always been there, and sounds the best it ever has. Well, thank you for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, whatever, so you don't miss whatever project I do next, and I'll see you around.